Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam, and we have a lot to get to today. A little bit of IndyCar, a little bit of NASCAR. And first off, though, Sam, how are you doing? And how was your trip down to Indy and St. Pete?
Yeah, we had a great weekend down there in St. Pete, hanging out at the IndyCar circuit and seeing all the drivers. Always fun to see them. You get a level of access at IndyCar that you don't get at a lot of other series, seeing them scooter around the paddock and out onto the track and whatnot. And we really had a great time down there, and I'm looking forward to talking about all the ways that IndyCar kind of beefed up the event this year and made it a little bit more of a spectacle. I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, it was a great race as well. Alex Palou starts off his campaign for a third straight championship with a win at the Grand Prix of St. Pete. His first win on those South Florida streets. I think it was a great performance from him and just kind of a classic Alex Palou dominant race.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I mean, early in the day, he was about as off my radar as he could be for, being Alex Palou. I mean, starts in 8th and spent a lot of that early race kind of in the high teens there, or low teens, I guess. Not really a major factor at the start of the race. It looked like, Scott McLaughlin might kind of run away with it for a little while. But then we see, throughout the race, he works his way up the field. Team hits on the strategy call, and, Alex Palou does what he does. He's one of the best drivers in the world for a reason.
Yeah, similar to you. I thought that I just didn't really see much of him to start the day. I noticed he was in those low teens, and I just kind of thought it was odd that we weren't seeing him make his way up the leaderboard, and I was worried that we were going to get, at least for his sake, a weird Alex Palou kind of finish where he finishes outside the top 10 and doesn't really make much of a day that didn't seem like it was going anywhere for them. But then you said it, they hit on the strategy call, and he executed it to perfection. A similar strategy that Newgarden and Dixon both had, but Palou was able to pull it off and do it better, and they really, hit the mark when he got out just ahead of his teammate Dixon on that last pit stop there, and I think he was able to hold on after that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the promotional push, especially from Fox for IndyCar this year, but it's funny, at the start of the day, I looked at it, and, the three drivers they've been pushing the most are Palou, and then Newgarden and Pato O'Ward. Mm-hmm. They all had their own commercials, and at the start of the day, it kind of looked like, obviously we know they're all great drivers, so they would be fine eventually, but for their first race on Fox, it looked like all three were kind of going to have a little bit of a disappointing day, you know, and then they end up with Palou on the top of the podium, and Newgarden coming in third with the podium as well, and then O'Ward with not his best day, but at least a good recovery drive from where he was. So all three kind of turned out a lot better than I originally expected.
Yeah, definitely. What did you think about Palou's ability there in the final laps to hold off Dixon and Newgarden, who were both charging pretty hard in those closing laps after, Palou was kind of held up a little bit by Stingray Robb. And I know Palou had some comments about that after the race and the whole push-to-pass system and how Robb was able to use that to his advantage. He had something like 70 seconds left, I think, and took it all the way down to 0 to stay on the lead lap as long as he could. In my opinion, Robb had every right to do that. That's, you don't have to pull over. He wasn't getting blue flagged for the leaders coming through. To me, he used it to his advantage, and that's the whole thing that I love about push to pass is you can use it however you want, pretty much whenever you want, except for the beginnings of starts and restarts and all that. But yeah, I think that he's kind of just proving the point of why push to pass works really well. But I was surprised to see him not get past Stingray Robb, even though Robb had that push to pass, because Palou had the faster car, and obviously I think it's a little bit of a better driver at this point.
Yeah, and I think Stingray has, like you said, I think every right to use the push to pass there. He has every right to defend his position on the lead lap. Once that last lap or two hits, I guess it doesn't matter as much, but earlier on, you still want that spot in case there's a caution, and you never know what could happen where all of a sudden the field's bunched up again and you got a real shot to maybe gain some spots. But yeah, I think Stingray was in the right to fight for that position, and as long as you do so cleanly, I think any driver would be, and Stingray definitely did in this instance, in my opinion. And he also had to be a little bit of a team player, just with Palou being in that fight with Newgarden. He kind of wanted to make things a little bit closer and easier for Newgarden to potentially make a pass for the lead, which obviously doesn't end up happening. But I think Stingray played it right at the end of the day, and I really have no problem with him trying to maintain and hold position, even using push to pass to do it. If we think of it similarly to a DRS or something, we never fault a driver for using that, obviously. And even though it's called push to pass, I think realistically at the end of the day, this functions kind of in a similar way.
Yeah, it's a push to pass, but it can be used for push to defend as well. I mean, we see guys do that all the time when they're leading and a guy's charging behind just to keep that lead. At the very end, they use the push to pass. So I got no problem with it, and I think that's one of the good things about IndyCar is I love how they use push to pass, and that it kind of leaves it up to the drivers on when they want to use it, how they want to use it. And I think that's something that's a great tool, whereas DRS or attack mode or whatever these other kind of manufactured passing systems are in other series, it's not as much up to the driver at that point to use it when they feel it's best. So I love that they give it to the drivers and they put it in their hands in the series. Yeah,
I'm in the same boat, and I think anytime we get to see the drivers kind of work strategy-wise with something like that, I think that's great. It adds another dimension to the race, and choosing when you get something like that, like a push to pass, or like we see in Formula E with the drivers getting boosts and you just using their battery, a certain amounts when they need to. I think that's all great, and I think it just adds more dimensions and more layers to the race, and really forces these drivers to think a little more in there, and the teams as well. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, well, regardless of the fact that Rob had the extra push to pass in his pocket, I still am surprised that Palou didn't push the button a little bit harder to get past. I know that Newgarden and Dixon were charging pretty hard there at the end. He had a pretty solid gap, 3, 4, 5 seconds back to those guys, and obviously it got down to under a second there for a little bit. I'm surprised that Palou didn't take the more opportunity to make that pass on Stingray. And I think that's maybe one of the flaws that Palou has. Is it's also one of his strengths that he's so risk averse and never puts himself in position to DNF or anything like that. But here, I think things could go a different way, and he leaves himself exposed for a little too long, and that lets Newgarden get past or Dixon get past as well. I think that's one thing that maybe he needs to get a little bit better at is not waiting too long to make those moves that, even if they are a bit risky, at the end of the day need to be done if you want to win.
Yeah, you're probably right in that he should have done it a little bit sooner, but I think even something like that where it definitely could be a weakness, just playing it a little too safe, I think that's also in a way a strength for him, playing it smart and not forcing a pass by Stingray maybe could have ended in an accident or something, and either he gets knocked back in the field a little bit or he gets knocked out of the race totally. I know that Stingray is a responsible driver, and so is Palou, so I don't expect at all that it would have ended in a crash, but you never know. And I think he probably should have done it a little bit sooner. You're right on that, because you don't want to let that gap fall too much. If Palou had one bad corner or something, that might have been the end for him. But I still think that his patience as a driver is still one of his best virtues, and sometimes it might hurt him, but I think it's going to help him a lot too.
Yeah, I think obviously he's shown that it helps more than it hurts, but sometimes you have to take that extra gear. That I've seen him do it, I know he has it, but I just think he needs to pull that out maybe a little bit more often. And obviously it's hard to judge a guy who's driving like Palou right now, 3 championships in 4 years, and obviously starting off this season strong with a win. It's hard to take any judgments on a guy like that, because how good he is. But if there's anything that I would say is a weakness for him, it would be that, but it's also his biggest strength, so it's hard to kind of take that away from him as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird talking about a champion driver like him and sort of insinuating that he doesn't have like a killer instinct the way that some
Yeah.
of them do. I think he does. I think it's just like you said, he's more reserved guy and a more reserved and methodical driver. And like you said, he's won 3 of the last 4 titles, and we all think he's pretty much in a class of his own as far as IndyCar drivers, especially on tracks like this. So, I don't really have an issue with it. It might bite him in the back every now and then, but overall, like you said, I think it's the patience is a better, good outweighs the bad.
Yeah, it's hard for anyone, I think, to challenge him right now or for his top spot in the series or take over that spot, because you look at a guy like McLaughlin, who I thought, and is my pick still to win the championship this year, but even those guys, it's like I feel like Chip Ganassi and their team pretty much always make the right decisions on strategy calls and get their guys in a spot to succeed. Dixon and Palou both on that same strategy that was obviously the favorable one in the end. Whereas a guy like Newgarden, McLaughlin, I feel like it was a big loss for him this weekend, starting on pole, leading the first 40 or so laps, and then the Penske ends up picking the wrong strategy, and now he's sent back to 4th place finish, which in the grand scheme of things, isn't a bad finish by any means, but when you start on pole and look that dominant to start the race, kind of a tough place to finish back and forth when he looks so good in clean air out front.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a big loss for him in my mind with his championship chances. He's certainly not out of it. I still think he'll be one of the top couple drivers this year. But you look at this opportunity where Palou starts a little bit further back than you would expect for him on a track like this. Even 8th is further back certainly than I would have expected. And, you're starting on the pole with a great chance to win this race, look like the fastest driver all day, to not even finish on the podium and then have Palou win the race and his teammate Newgarden come in 3rd, finishing ahead of him, is it's a pretty gutting day for McLaughlin and that whole crew. I mean, I think they'll bounce back from it, like I said, but not a good start to the season. Still 4th is certainly not bad, but it feels about as bad as a 4th place finish could.
Yeah, sometimes I think being in the lead is the hardest place to be in terms of making strategy decisions, because everyone else has the opportunity to push you and push the envelope of strategy and force you into a mistake. And, maybe they make that decision and it turns out to be the right one if you're in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th and you have a different strategy. But if you're 1st, and also if you're 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and you make the wrong strategy at the end of the day, you still finish in maybe around the same position and no one looks at it the same as if you mess that strategy up from the lead. The lead, you have to react to what everyone else is doing around you. You don't want to come in first or come in later and make the mistake of doing the wrong thing from the lead. So I think there is a little bit more pressure from the lead to make those decisions. And, Penske, for the most part, they make pretty good decisions on their strategy and stuff. Surprising to see them pick the wrong one here for McLaughlin. And, it's not going to hurt him too much. I think, it's the first race. His season's not over by any means. It's a 4th place finish. But it's one of those things that if you look back at the end of the year, it's those small decisions that make the difference in a championship fight, especially against Palou, who seems to make the right decision every time. So I think that this is one that, looking back on it, when you look at small points margins throughout the year, this one is one that could have shifted much better in McLaughlin's way in the end.
Yeah, this is one that isn't going to feel like a big deal at first. You finish in 4th place, still at a solid race, still at a lot of laps. But in hindsight, I think we're going to look back at it as being one of the defining moments of the season potentially, because, like you said, the margin for error is so thin with a guy like Alex Palou, who's been so dominant at the top of the series. And to take a win from him at a course like this would have been a big way to start the season, and would have been a real exclamation point if they'd been able to hold him off. But not only allowing him to win, but falling back to 4th could be pretty catastrophic to their championship chances.
Yeah, on the one hand, you have a guy who finishes fourth, started on pole, led 40 laps, looked super dominant. And on the other hand, guy who started in eighth was all the way back in 13th, 14th at one point, managed to work their way back up to first. It's just those small moments throughout the season that make the difference in the end, and this is definitely one that I think will hurt McLaughlin in the end if he's not able to win the championship, because this seemed like a slam dunk victory for the first race, and yet he walks out 3 positions behind Palou.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I said, I can't pick against Palou, at least in a long-term setting, until I see him lose something like this, because he just makes so few mistakes that at the end of the day, that consistency over the course of a season is what's going to lead you to a championship in IndyCar. And like we said, it's not a catastrophic mistake, but it certainly feels like a big one, even being this early in the season for McLaughlin. And we'll see, maybe later down the line, Palou will make a mistake and things will even out, but he doesn't make a lot of them, so you can't really count on that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this week marked the beginning of the IndyCar on Fox era, which I thought was a great first step. Obviously, there's going to be some moments in your first race with a new broadcast team and everything that don't go exactly how you plan it, but overall, I thought Fox did a great job broadcasting the race. I liked the booth. I liked a lot of the things that they did. The graphics were pretty good. I felt like there was some room for improvement there, but for the most part, I thought that they handled the broadcast pretty professionally. There was not too many commercials, and I just thought it was a great start for IndyCar on Fox, something that I was very wary of coming into the partnership when they announced it last year. And we just got the ratings back. There was 1.4 million viewers for the first IndyCar on Fox race, which I think is the highest non-500 rating that IndyCar has gotten since 2011 for a broadcast. So very good numbers on their first race. All the advertising seemed to pay off, and just feel like there's a lot of excitement coming from this first IndyCar on Fox race.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I expected from a ratings point of view. I thought being on main Fox would be a big lift for them, and I think I expected it to be one of the biggest non-500 races in a while, just with all the promotion that they put into it and time they've spent, sort of cultivating the fan base there. I think, being at the race, I didn't get to go back and watch the entire broadcast, but I got to see some highlights, and I really liked what I saw. I know that there was a couple technical difficulties that I heard about, but like you said, it's their first time, and even having the experience, some of the people there having worked on the NASCAR broadcasts and whatnot, there's still going to be some technical difficulties potentially with a lot of newcomers. I did really like the graphics, and I liked what I saw, albeit it wasn't the full package. So I was definitely interested to hear your thoughts as someone who watched the whole thing.
Yeah, I thought it was great. There were a couple areas that I think they could improve. If you look at qualifying, I feel like they didn't really show too much in terms of sector times and their position relative to other drivers out there, if they're down or up on the top pace and all that, which I think that they can pretty easily improve as this goes on and add that in. There were, some other things as well. I liked the graphics for the most part. They didn't lean too much into the whole cartoon characterized versions that NASCAR on Fox does of the drivers. There is still a little bit of that in there, but for the most part, it feels more real. And the score bug on the side, I liked, although the top 5 being larger than everyone else, I think took up a little bit more space. But for the most part, these are all small things that I think can improve and will improve pretty quickly. The big things are the things that I liked in terms of the booth. I thought Buxton was pretty good. Obviously, Bell and Hinchcliffe up there were great as always. So, keeping those two guys from the NBC booth who were, two of the best parts of that program over there, huge for them to bring those guys over. So the booth was good. I feel like there wasn't too much in terms of commercials. For the most part, if they did go to commercial, it was side by side. So I like that as well. And I just thought it was, a very professional broadcast, one that seemed like it had a lot of care and thought put into it. which I think is a great thing and something juxtaposed to what we're getting from NASCAR on Fox right now. Is definitely very clear to see the difference in the effort that they're putting into the two broadcasts. But I thought it was very solid, and I just think it's good. And I just think it's a very good start for IndyCar on Fox.
Yeah, I mean, from the clips that I saw, I could tell a lot of energy was coming from the booth, and from everyone on the broadcast, and I think that was really needed. That's something that kind of separates it from the NASCAR broadcast, like we've been talking about. And I'm glad it went pretty well, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the races on Fox throughout the season.
Yeah, another thing that I liked as they entered, into the Grand Prix portion of the race and of the coverage, they had a little driver intros for who was starting on every row, and it was kind of like what you see on a football broadcast whenever the guys pop up and it says with their name and where they're from and all that. And it showed, where they're starting, what row they were on, and some stats about them. I really liked that. I thought that was fun and something unique that we don't usually get in racing. So I enjoyed that. It was a little bit awkward because some guys I feel like didn't know exactly what to say or what to do in their intros, but I think they cleaned those up, and I think just as this thing goes forward, it's only going to get better, which is the very exciting thing for me, is that baseline, there were some small issues, but I would give it probably a 7 or an 8 out of 10 broadcast. But the best thing is that it's going to get a lot better as we go forward, which is the very exciting part to me.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, and like I said, I can't wait to watch the rest of the season on there. I think we've got a really exciting season coming, honestly.
Yeah, well, in your, on your perspective, how was it being there in person? I've been to that race a couple times now. Very fun one to attend in person, but I just wanted to get your thoughts from being there on the ground.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I really had a blast on the ground. Obviously, it was pretty hot there, as always. Mm-hmm. Nothing really IndyCar can do about that. It's just always going to be, even in March or even when they held this race in February, it's just going to be hot in Florida. Yeah. But I really enjoyed my time there. I was only there on Sunday, but we had a great time on Sunday. They seemed like they really stepped up their game with some of the activations and whatnot. They, in the main plaza area, they had some sort of references to the commercials they've been running. They had like a newspaper stand with a fake Padua Award newspaper, and they had the Joseph Newgarden cologne that he has in his commercial and everything.
Yeah, nice.
I thought they did a really good job trying to get more fans engaged, and they still had all the stuff they had before, which was plenty of shops, all the team trailers and whatnot, plenty of food options. I've always had a great time down there in St. Pete at that race, but I think they did step it up a little bit this year. They also had a TV in that main plaza area as well, big screen. So, people who were GA and may not have been able to get a good view could have watched there. And, we really had a great time there on Sunday.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I'm glad that I was curious if they were going to step up or change anything with the event. With it feel like being kind of a new era for IndyCar, the first full season for IndyCar on Fox, and I was just, I was wondering if they were going to change anything at the event. It sounds like they made a couple slight improvements, which is good to hear. That's always a really fun one to attend, and sadly wasn't able to make it this year, but I feel like I'll probably be going there for many years to come. So very happy to hear that it was a good in-person experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always an easy one for us to make, and really love St. Pete as a city regardless, and I think that area where they do the track is really nice and a really fun area to do a street race. So glad they do it every year there, and excited for a lot more years to go into that one.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move to our personal podiums here for the Grand Prix of St. Pete. I have Alex Palou in my number 1 spot. We already touched on him a lot, but I think that it was just a great first race from him, and very Palou-like performance. In second, I had Alexander Rossi. It was a really solid first weekend for him at RCR. was up in the top 10 and even the top 5 for much of the race before finishing in 10th, but very strong showing from him there in his first outing with the new team. And then in third, I had Pato O'Ward, who started back in 23rd, got a puncture on the first lap after that incident involving Siegel and Power. Must have ran over some debris or something and was stuck back with a puncture, but managed to come back through the field in a great recovery drive on a different strategy and finish 11th. So those are the kind of things that I'm not sure Pato would have done, a year or two ago even. I think it's that thing that we've been talking about with him is seeing the growth and turning horrible days into pretty solid ones, and that's something that I think is going to serve him well throughout the entirety of a season. So that's the stuff that we're looking for from Pato, and I think it was a pretty great drive.
Yeah, it absolutely was, and I didn't have him on my personal podium, but he just missed it. I think obviously a tough break qualifying so far back in the field, and he did show a lot of fight out there on Sunday. You were right. Recovery drives like that are the kind of thing that can keep you in the championship long term. Obviously, more 11th place finishes aren't going to help, but certainly better than finishing it back in 23rd or 22nd or anything like that. So for my top 3, I also have Palou first. I mean, couldn't really pick anybody else. Just excellent job fighting through the field. Like we said, strategy calls were great. Driving was great. Pretty much everything. A perfect Sunday from Alex Palou. And then I've actually gone Joseph Newgarden second. Started this race back in 10th. Nearly held on to second place. Ends up finishing third. But I think reason why I went with Newgarden here, obviously a lot of people here would go with Scott Dixon as well. And, I think he's right in that conversation as well, finishing ahead of Newgarden. But I know that a big talking point for us before the season with Newgarden was his ability on these road and street courses. Obviously, we've seen him dominate the 500 the last couple of years and be a real good oval guy. And he has had some success on the street and road courses in the past, but it's been a bit of a struggle for him recently. And, to come out and make up a bunch of spots in this race and finish on the podium, I think is big for him and a big step in his season. And then I also went with Rossi in third. You pretty much hit the nail on the head here, just making a bit of recovery drive from 20th to 10th and coming in top 10 first race with Ed Carpenter, I think was a massive weekend for him. And, I'm excited to see where he can go from here. I know we were both expecting that he would take a bit of a fall off this year just with moving teams. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm excited to see now if he can hold up this form and kind of be a surprise driver of the year of, someone we thought would be a good driver, but maybe limited by their team and their equipment. Maybe he won't be as limited as we thought.
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing as well if he can put in some solid performances, and kind of what I was expecting from him to still put in those solid performances, but just not be able to get as much out of it because that new team and it's just the equipment and staff around there isn't quite as good as what we see at McLaren, but it seems like the ECR is also putting a lot of money and time into turning their operation there around as well. So hopefully we see that as the season goes on. For Stinker of the Week, I had Will Power. Just, that turn 3 incident on lap 1. There was a lot of checkups in front of him, but looking at the onboard, it seemed like he had plenty of time to react to it. And it just felt like that incident was, at the end of the day, on him. And sad to take out Siegel and Foster and him on that first lap. I think that, Power is a better driver than that. And I just think that at the end of the day, he could have avoided that if he really needed to.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. Is really the only other guy I considered other than my pick, which was Colton Herta. I predicted him to win the race. Even if he didn't win, I thought he would at least put up a good fight, especially after he qualified second. But he ends up finishing back in 16th. And I know that he had some other issues on the day. He had the one long pit stop that cost him some time early in the race. So, it's not fully on him, but it's still a really disappointing day for him, especially with his two teammates up there finishing fifth and sixth. Kirkwood and Erickson both had really solid days. So, this really should have been a top 5 finish at least for Herta. And for him to finish all the way down in 16th is just a rough start to his season.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like he was on for possibly the win there for a while, but couple pit mistakes, and he's down there in 16th, and not a very good start to his season when it seemed like there was a lot of momentum to come out of the weekend. So disappointing to see from Herta. Moving on to NASCAR at COTA, Christopher Bell wins for the second straight week with a great move on Kyle Busch and some excellent defense of William Byron and Tyler Reddick in the closing laps to hold on for the victory. Bell is a guy that we both picked at the beginning of the year to win the championship, and I think he's off to a great start for that bid. Obviously early on, but winning at tracks that are very different like Atlanta and COTA is a great sign. It proves he's a very versatile driver, something that we already knew. But with 2 wins, I think now he can really go after it the rest of the year and with some safety in mind, take some more risks that maybe some other guys aren't going to. Also, he can focus on more stage points and just build that playoff resume before we get there. So there's a lot to take away from Bell right now. I think he's on a very hot streak, and it seems like an excellent drive this weekend as well, backing that up.
Yeah, I think we were both right on this one from the get-go. I feel like I'm already ready to take a bit of a victory lap on Christopher Bell here, even though, we look at this current NASCAR system, he could win 10 races and still not win the championship.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You can't really do that. But, I still think even if he doesn't win the series championship, I think he's really in a great spot for a really number of accolades this year. He could end up with the most wins or the regular season title or something like that. I think is well within his grasp. He's 4th right now in points, but he's getting pretty heavily docked for having a DNF at Daytona. 2 wins in 3 races. That's clearly going to be a guy that is going to be up there at the end of the year. And I think along with maybe 1 or 2 other guys, I think he's going to be one of the dominant drivers of the season without a doubt.
Yeah, I think he was a guy that we both seemed like would be a dominant driver for the season. And obviously it's very early, but I feel like that's proving to be the case so far. I just think that his driving style, he seems to have it all. He's learning and maturing every year. Racing Kyle Busch differently this year at COTA than he has the past couple years where he wrecked him. He learned from those mistakes, raced him much better, much cleaner this year, was still able to make that overtake in the end on Busch for the win. I think he's just maturing, growing. Seems like just a steady driver. Nothing really sets him off too much. And I think that those are all the qualities that you need to be a championship race car driver, obviously combined with the speed that we know he has and everything else. I just think it's an excellent start. What I'm really interested to see, though, is how he performs this week at Phoenix. Phoenix is a place that he hasn't had great performances when he's gotten to the championship for so far. I think that this is a great opportunity with back-to-back wins for him and his team to just, learn as much as they can at Phoenix for the fall race. I know that obviously it's a little bit different in the spring with track temps and just everything else. So it's going to be a little bit of a different race, but this is a great opportunity for them to really learn and figure out how they can run Phoenix the best for when I think they'll be there at the end of the season.
Yeah, and we'll get to our Phoenix predictions later, but I think he's certainly still going to be a force to be reckoned with this weekend. I don't necessarily think he's going to win the race, but I think he's going to be competitive. And like you said, I think this is a great opportunity for him. It could almost be a little bit of a testing session as much as a regular season race could be. Like you said, 2 wins already, and I'm sure he's going to win a couple more before season's end. So there might be a chance for him to take some risks here, try some different things, and put himself in a better position, assuming he makes that Final Four.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, this playoff format is very different than what we see in other series, and it makes it difficult to even if you have a great regular season, to be guaranteed into that championship 4. But I think at the end of the day, he will be there this year. And I think that this week is a great moment for him to take some time and really learn about this track, figure out what has gone wrong for them so far there, and put themselves in a much better position for when I think they'll be there later on in the fall at the championship. But also right now, it seems like it's just hard to beat him because he has all the tools in the book. And I think another thing that I predicted before the season was that Bell would take over as the main driver at JGR, an aging Denny Hamlin, new Chase Briscoe, who's been solid, but hasn't stood out too much so far for these first few races, and Ty Gibbs, who's struggled so far as well. I think this is really Bell's team right now, and it looks like a very bright future for Bell in that 20 car.
Yeah, I mean, you laid it out right there, but I think it's pretty unquestionable that he's going to be the face of JGR for a long time to come now. And yeah, I think that, like you said, he doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses in his game. I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier, but winning at Atlanta and COTA back to back, it's almost as night and day as you can get as far as these tracks that we go to. So it makes it even more impressive. It's not just him dominating one certain layout; it's all over the board. He's competitive and one of the best drivers in the field.
Yeah, for sure. NASCAR, they introduced a new layout at COTA this week. Before the week, there was a lot of back and forth on what the actual layout was. They released a few different renderings of it in the week leading up, and none of them seemed to match up with each other. But eventually, they got it figured out, and I think that the layout was very solid. I enjoyed the racing. I think it might have even been a little bit better than the original, in my opinion, because you take away, there's obviously the big dive bomb spot already in turn 1. And then, up in that top part of the track, there was another dive spot as well, where it kind of goes up and then kinks back, down that main straight on the back. And taking that away, I think just helped the racing be a little bit more clean. Turn 6A, 6B, whatever you want to call it, was still really good for passing. And, in the stadium section has been good for passing in the NASCAR Cup Series at COTA so far as well. So I think that this new layout worked out very well. I was a little bit worried about it because so far the racing at COTA has been great in NASCAR, but this new layout is one that I enjoyed, and it seems like these Cup cars are able to take kind of smaller configurations a lot better than other series are. So the more that they do, the more that they do that at places like COTA now, and the Chicago street race is very similar in that it's just kind of tight and a smaller layout. It always seems to produce great racing, and this week, in my opinion, was no different.
Yeah, I mean, personally, there's part of me that wish they'd kept the old layout just for consistency with the other series, and because I really enjoyed it. But I do think the racing was still great in this layout, so I think it kind of ended up working out all right in the end for NASCAR. I will say, I think one thing for me that's kind of stood out a little bit with this track, and they've had issues with it at other courses before, but just finding some consistency with the track limits, I think is certainly an issue. Obviously, it's a lot tougher for these cars to run within the track than say when F1 goes to COTA. But it felt like an issue to me. For example, like a section like the S's. I mean, a lot of guys, it felt like they were just almost taking it straight on, just shooting it straight through. And I just wish they find a little bit of consistency there in calling that. Like I said, I get it's not as easy as driving there with other series maybe, but I would love to see NASCAR really put the hammer down a little bit and say, here are the limits, don't go beyond that.
Yeah, I completely agree. These cars aren't as nimble, don't have the downforce that, say, an F1 car or even an IndyCar has. But at the same time, there's a track there for a reason. If we're not going to stay on that, or at least in the realm of what the design of the track is supposed to be, then I don't know what we're doing here. If you look at, I know that they go wide through a lot of turns, like the last turn before they get on the main straight, or the second to last turn before they get on the main straight. Coming out of the stadium section, there's some turns that they take very wide. And that to me is a little bit different because you're still following the flow of how that corner is supposed to go. It's just that these cars can't quite take that the same as a different type of car. But if you look at through the S's, that's something that they can do. We've seen them do it. It's just easier for them to obviously go straight, as it would be for anybody in that situation. And the whole part of the S's is that they challenge you with that fast back and forth flowing kind of movement. Taking that away just takes away the whole kind of point of the S's in that part of the track. So yeah, it's something that I think they really need to address going forward, and we need to see big changes there because even in the race, the guys didn't really know exactly how you were supposed to take that. You saw multiple radio calls to their team. Can we go through track limits in turn 6, or can we not? That's something as well that is tough from a competitive standpoint, because you have guys kind of playing by different rules throughout the day, not knowing what they can and can't do.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just have to find some consistency there, put the hammer down, and I agree with you as far as the different types of corners. I think, like you said, I don't mind them going a little bit wide, say, on that last corner, because, like you said, they're still going with the flow of the track, and yeah, they're able to take more speed in if they go wide, but they also still have to cover that extra ground going wide. So I don't mind that as much, especially in these kinds of cars. But like you said, a section like the S's, they really need to crack down on it, and at least see drivers making more of an attempt, at staying on track. I think that's really the big deal here. Is it felt like at times some of those guys weren't even making an attempt to be within track limits, and that's sort of where you have to draw the line and say, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be as smooth as it might be in other series, like we said, but you got to kind of put the hammer down there and say, here's our limits, here's what you can and can't do, and stick to it.
Yeah, and if you want to make it like a strike kind of penalty system where you get 3 strikes before it's a stop and go penalty or whatever, I think that's fine too. It's just there needs to be some level of enforcement of it. These guys in heavy cars like that going through those S's, eventually throughout the day you are going to make a mistake and probably miss one of those corners. That's fine, but it's if you do it every lap. So I think it's the system of implementing some strikes and say you get 3 times where you can exceed those track limits throughout the race, and then after that it is a penalty. I think that's the way forward for NASCAR and dealing with this system that is kind of gets laughed at by other motorsports fans around the world, of seeing them go through those S's just straight. Yeah, it's not what you want to put out there to the other, the motorsports community at large.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat that I think a warning system would be great, giving guys the chance there to maybe say, you miss it once or twice and that's fine. That's normal for the race, but you've got to start making an attempt on it, and that's certainly not something that can be happening every lap.
Yeah. Let's touch on NASCAR on Fox, and I don't want to make this kind of a weekly thing. So far it has been throughout the season, but with IndyCar on Fox debuting this week, I think it's a very good week to juxtapose those two broadcasts. So far, what we saw at COTA, in my opinion, was not very great from NASCAR. On Fox, they missed a big moment in the key battle for the lead between Bell and Busch. They were coming through the stadium section, and the camera stayed with them as the camera was, the battle was blocked from the camera by a huge grandstand in a very key moment. That's, a very tough look. And then as well, a few other times, they cut away from a big battle in those closing 10 laps. It's just, those are the things that when you juxtapose that with what we saw on IndyCar on Fox, it's you don't see that level of I don't even know what you call it. It just seems like they don't have the same level of care from a like a production standpoint that the new IndyCar on Fox broadcast has. And I wish that they would take a little bit more pride in it. I don't know if this is a sign that Fox as a whole is just transitioning more of their motorsport stuff to IndyCar and they're kind of leaving NASCAR by the wayside or what. But regardless, it's not fun for fans to sit through some key battles and some great moments of racing just to have, them show something else or the moment get blocked by a bad camera angle. I just wish the production staff would take a little bit more accountability and have a little bit more pride in what they're putting out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the production could definitely be a little bit better. To put a bit of a positive spin on it, I will say I appreciated the lack of commercials towards the end of the race. Mm-hmm. Obviously we got some when they were under caution, but that's a different deal. We had the all-out segment where Toyota sponsored it, and it allowed it to keep going for a little bit, not have those commercials. And I hope something like that continues. I understand their need for commercials throughout the race, to make money and have it worth being on TV. But it would be great if they took the last 20% or so of the race and made it no commercials. You can't really put a lap number on it because laps at Bristol are a lot different than they are at COTA or somewhere like that. But, maybe the last 20%, even if it's like 10 or 15%, and just say, we're not going to run any commercials during this time period. We're going to let it play out from this point on. I think that would be great for the sport, and it would be great too just for people's views of the broadcast. I think that would change a lot, even if we had to sit through a fair amount of commercials for the first two stages.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like there was a point to be made about them having less commercials this week, and it felt that way to me as well. I don't know how that works out every week because I'm pretty sure they have to try and get the same level of commercial load every week on their broadcasts. I think it kind of is dependent on when the cautions fly, if they're able to get commercials in if they have to go to commercial during key moments, or if they can take commercials at some times where, the racing is kind of leveled out and we're at a team spot in the race. So I think that makes a difference as well, but it just seemed like there was a little bit less commercials this week. So I'll give them credit for that and how that worked out. But yeah, some of the other stuff, it's just, I feel like you can tell that there's a difference in the pride that's being taken in other broadcasts for other networks on other series and the one that we have here. I hate it, and I hate that we're talking about it pretty much every week now, but I feel like it's an integral part of watching the race and watching the sport, and I'd like to, kind of keep some pressure on them from the fans to make some changes going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I'm sure fans are tired of calling it out and tired of talking about it, but I think it's important that the fans, keep putting the pressure on them to make the broadcast better and continue to improve, and, that they do the same, of course, when we go to our other networks later in the year. This isn't just a personal thing against Fox or anything. It's, it's about making the broadcast better across the series and, across other series as well. So, I would hope that the fans, continue to sort of hold Fox accountable and in ways that they can improve the broadcast, and that they continue to do the same for other series as well.
Yeah. I just want to talk quickly on stage breaks on road courses. I think I've talked about this before on here, and I've had this, take for a while, but I just really wish that they would get rid of stage breaks on road courses, really in general, but especially on road courses, because they take away the flow of the natural pit cycles. Plus the point of stages is to reward guys that have quality, that have been racing, at the top of the field for the whole day. But that doesn't happen because all the guys who are doing good pit to lead after the stage break, and then the stage winners are a bunch of guys who have been running 10th, 15th, 20th throughout the day. So you're not even rewarding the guys for running good throughout the day, which is the whole point of stages in the first place. It just kind of seems counterproductive to me at this point. And I wish that they would get rid of it and we'd just have kind of a naturally flowing race instead of what we see here with the stage breaks. I just don't like how it makes the race run, how it just kind of devalues the whole stage point in the first place. It's just not a good style of racing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. We see these guys taking pit breaks, right before the end of the stage, and I just think that it would be, like you said, it would flow better just as a normal race, no stages or anything. I think at the end of the day, that's what a lot of the fans want to see, and we saw for long runs. I mean, the stage 3 is effectively half the race at COTA, and we saw that it was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
We got some great racing there at the end, and cars weren't too spread out or anything to where we couldn't have great racing. So I think for this race and for the other road courses, I think getting rid of stages would be great. I get that there's some arguments for stages at ovals with maybe regrouping the cars and getting them back together, and at least at certain ovals, but I don't think that really applies at the road courses, and it just feels more natural to see these guys race from start to finish. We'll have cautions anyways, I'm sure, but that with no stage breaks, I think would be a big help.
Yeah, and you, like I mentioned, a guy like SVG who was running out front for the majority of stage 1 pits from the lead, ends up still getting a 4th or a 5th or whatever in stage 1, but doesn't get that stage win that he would have got if they just kept it green. Still allowed the stage points, but just kept it green. And then in stage 2, you get a guy like Kyle Busch who, instead of probably getting a stage win there, you get I think Ryan Preece wins the stage, and Ryan Preece, no offense to him, but he wasn't a factor for any of the day. So it's just things like that just, it devalues the whole point of the stage break in the first place. I just think it's time for a change in that aspect, because the point, it's not even getting the point of the stages in the first place. And then on top of that, it messes with the natural pit cycles as well. So there's two things there that I just, I don't like that we get as a result of stage breaks on road courses.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Preece, he was 20th at the end of stage 1, and he ended the race 33rd.
Yeah.
Like you said, he really wasn't much of a factor. He just led those 3 laps at the end of the stage, and that was enough to get him, some really valuable stage points, which, good for him for going for that and for executing on it. But I agree with you. It doesn't really fit the purpose of rewarding the drivers who were out in front for most of the stage, and the guys who really were kind of dominating the race. So yeah, and it makes sense strategy wise for those teams, those drivers that are actually ahead, to pit when they pit, and to sort of throw away the stage points at times. So yeah, I think it's kind of a broken system. Of course, we can have the argument about whether it's totally broken for all tracks another day, but I think for road courses, it's certainly a great argument that it's just a broken system.
Yeah. Personal top 3 performers from COTA. And first, I had Chase Elliott, recovered from the lap 1 spin when he was hit by Ross Chastain, coming into turn 1, lap 1, to finish 4th. A great comeback drive from him to finish the day with really solid points when it looked very grim for him for much of it. And second, I had Christopher Bell. I already talked about him and the great win that he had. An excellent drive, didn't really put a foot wrong the whole day. Combine that with a great car, and you get a winning performance. And then third, I had Kyle Busch. Led a bunch of laps, kind of outdueled SVG even for portions of that race. Just didn't have the car in the end to hold up on a longer run on those tires. The tires began to fade, and it sent him back to, I believe, where he finished in 4th or 5th. But yeah, I thought it was a great run from Busch. And another one that kind of gets away from him in the end for a win. But I think the signs are there that Busch will probably get a win this year.
Yeah, so my 3, I should say. I got 3, and then I guess an honorable mention. My first one is Christopher Bell, winning this race. Back-to-back wins, obviously, like we said. Another race, kind of like last week, he didn't really lead very many laps and ends up winning the race. This one, he only leads 8 laps, but to his credit, he had the fastest car for longer than that. You could tell that stage 3, his car was on fire, making that run up to catch Kyle Busch and end up taking the lead there. So, really another solid performance from Bell, and we've already talked about him being maybe the dominant driver of the year. I got Chase Elliott second. I think you make a great argument for putting him first. to finish all the way up in fourth. I was watching it, and I saw him back in like 19th, and I already thought, oh, that's a pretty good recovery drive after what happened to him at the beginning. So to finish all the way up in fourth is really a heck of a performance, and that shows why he's one of the best on these road courses. And then I thought about Kyle Busch third, and I've got him as an honorable mention. I still think he was great, and I think this has been a really good start to the season for him. He had a chance to win at Daytona, was one of those guys competing at the end. Obviously ends up finishing 34th after a crash. Only so much you can do there, but finished 7th and 5th the last 2 weeks. Really nice bounce back for him, and that win's only a matter of time. I know he had a lot of close calls last year, but surely it's got to happen soon. My third guy, though, instead, I went with Noah Gragson. Comes in 8th, was as high up as 5th in those last few laps. Ends up losing a couple spots there towards the end, but still his best finish since the Brickyard last year, and really nice bounce back after starting the year with a 28th and a 34th. Really nice to see him up there in the top 10. A really great race from him.
Yeah, great drive from Noah Gragson. I think he's really settling into that FRM role, and I think he'll get better as the season goes along as well. I think he ran pretty well at those first 2 races too. Just got caught up in accidents on super speedways, and that happens. But I think he's in a really good place at FRM, and I think he's got some speed in that car as well. So super excited to see what he does the rest of the year. For Stinker of the Week, I have Ross Chastain for taking out Chase Elliott in that turn 1 incident. I don't think it was as bad as it's being made out to be by everyone. It's turn 1, lap 1 at COTA. Somebody's going to get run into somewhere there. It's unfortunate that it was, Ross and Chase, but in the end, there's going to be a crash there. It's just a matter of who does it. I think it was a very aggressive move by Ross, one that I don't think he would make again if he had the chance, but somebody's going to try and make that move in the end, and this time it was him, and he just couldn't get it stopped in time. And pretty unfortunate for Chase Elliott to be caught up in that, but was able to recover, like you mentioned, and finish in 4th. So really solid drive from Chase Elliott, but I think that move by Ross is one that he would take back if he could.
Yeah, I agree, and I think unfortunately there were a lot of candidates for Stinker of the Week this week. I think Ross was certainly up there. I think, like you said, I don't think there was a lot of malice in that move, but it was definitely over-aggressive and, uncalled for so early in the race. And then I think, we'll get to the Austin Cindric, Ty Dillon incident in a little bit. I think both those guys could be up there nominated just for what happened there. For me, though, I'm going to go with Daniel Suarez. I know I watched his interview after his incident, and he was talking about how it's kind of just unavoidable with the way the car hit the curb and everything. And I get that every now and then you're going to have a spin like that, but this season for Suarez is so important for him. Looked like a guy going into the season that was amongst the most likely to lose his ride going into next year. And I just think incidents like that could end up costing his job, especially end up taking out a teammate on the day in Connor Zilisch. And, that could potentially be a guy that takes his spot next year too. So, a really disappointing day for Daniel Suarez, and unfortunate to get caught up in something like that. But, you got to figure that out and, manage something a little bit better. I think they could have had a big result on the day, if not.
Yeah, well, speaking of Zilisch, I think he's a guy who had a huge weekend, and I thought about putting him in my personal podium, to be honest, because of how he drove in the Xfinity race, winning there, in a great first showing in his first full Cup race as well. Qualified 14th, fell to the back when he got a puncture because of that lap 1, turn 1 incident. But he fought his way back all the way up into the top 15. He had great pace making his way through the field. Was really just, able to pass cars right and left, and and then he got caught up in Suarez's spin, ending his day. And I really think we have a star in the making with Zilisch. He seems to have all the tools in the bag, especially on these road courses. it seems like he was able to make light work of a lot of full-time Cup drivers coming through the field there. And you add that to the fact that he's not a bad oval driver either. I think there's all of the signs that Connor Zilisch is kind of the next star of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, he had quite an eventful weekend, but I really thought that you could tell the talent is there, and I thought he was mostly fantastic. I watched the end of that Xfinity race on Saturday, and he was really on his own level as far as pace throughout the Xfinity weekend, putting it on pole and then coming back to win that race, even though, he ended up having some issues. He had a penalty in that race. He had some damage from being over-aggressive, which, at the end of the day is his fault, but he fought through that to win that race, ended up winning it somewhat convincingly. So really a heck of a performance there. And then his Cup ride definitely ended sooner than I had hoped on Sunday. I was really looking forward to watching him race this weekend, and I thought that he could have potentially ended up in the top 10 just given his pace and what he had shown so far throughout the day. It was really unfortunate that he ended up in that incident with Suarez, but I know that this is a guy that we're going to see more of in the near future, and I'm excited to see him.
I think we see him at least once or twice again this year in the Cup Series. Obviously, Trackhouse has the extra car. They used it this week for Zilisch to race on at COTA, but I think we'll see him at least once or twice again, maybe at an oval, but I don't doubt that we'll see him at one of the other road courses, whether it's Sonoma or Chicago or Watkins Glen, somewhere like that. I think that he will make another appearance this year in Cup, and super excited to see how that goes for him if we get to see him again.
Yeah, I think Watkins Glen would be a great spot for him to come back, just because we've seen Trackhouse run some other guys out there before at that track, and I think that would be a great opportunity. It's a kind of a crazy choice between these two, but maybe him or Helio Castroneves gets back in the car there. But either one, I would love to see back in the car at the Glen. I think that's a perfect spot for hopefully Zilisch to get one more start before the playoffs and really get ready. Even if it's not with Trackhouse, I'm sure somebody's going to pick him up next year. He seems like a can't-miss talent.
Yeah, I agree. Well, taking to this Austin Cindric-Ty Dillon incident, I know there's been a lot of talk about it online, but take us through that and, what happened there between, I saw Cindric kind of get in the right rear of Ty Dillon on the main straight and send him into the wall. Kind of what led to that, and is Cindric gonna get a penalty for this, or what do you think's gonna happen there?
Yeah, I mean, this was pretty early on in the race. We're going into the last corner, and Ty Dillon kind of pushes Cindric off the track. I don't know if it was something with any malice intended, but he was certainly putting the elbows out and wasn't going to leave him any room. And Cindric sort of took it personally down the front stretch and ends up, it looked pretty clear from what I saw that he drives into him and spins him around. And, for me personally, I think we defend aggressive driving a lot and aggressive moves, and I think we should. I think it's a fun part of NASCAR, seeing maybe a bump and run or something. Seeing these guys get physical with each other on the track is something that we don't see in a lot of other series, and it's something that sets NASCAR apart. But this didn't even really seem like a move. He wasn't trying to get ahead of Dillon or anything. He was behind him and clips him and dumps him there on the front stretch, seemingly, purely out of some sort of spite or revenge. I just think this was a really poor move from Cindric, and I don't know if they're going to suspend him for it, but I could certainly see some sort of a fine or a points deduction or something like that. I think even at a lower speed track like a road course, I think this is something that NASCAR can't incentivize going forward, that any driver, when they get upset, can dump somebody else and set them back in their race. So that's sort of my take on the incident, is that I don't think it's going to be a massive penalty, but I think there's got to be something for what Cindric did here.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's getting beat and banged around out there on a road course. That's kind of just what happens in NASCAR. But if you're really upset about Ty Dillon kind of nudging you out of the way and taking your spot, just get him up there in turn one. He wasn't that far away from him. Just, bump him out of the way in turn one and take that spot back. I don't think there was any need for to be right reared on the straightaway. I know that it is slower speeds than it would be on an oval, but it's still kind of that intent that should be penalized. And yeah, there was just really no need from that, in my opinion, from Cindric. It seemed like one where you can just kind of race him a little bit harder throughout the rest of the race and get your retaliation that way than by dumping him and ending his race really early when there was really no need for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a move that benefits anybody. I mean, it's early in the race, and they were fairly far back in the pack. It's not like they're fighting for the lead or anything, and I just think it was really poor from Cindric. I don't think he meant to physically hurt Ty Dillon or anything, but like I said, that's just something that NASCAR can incentivize going forward, and I think there's got to be some sort of response from them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's predict our winner for Phoenix next week for NASCAR, and then we'll be on our way for today. But for me, it's got to be Ryan Blaney, an average finish of 2.8 in the last 6 races here, and he hasn't even won, which is really wild. But that many good finishes has to result in a win eventually. I think this is the week, and kind of similar to what we mentioned for Bell. Obviously the difference is that Blaney has obviously ran very well here, just hasn't gotten the win. But I think Blaney needs to figure out the way that it takes to win here. And then he'll be really good to go once the championship comes around if he can get to that championship 4. But I think this will be his week, and it's just hard to go that many finishes seemingly in the top 5 and not find your way into victory lane in one of those.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I try and switch things up and pick someone else just so we're not picking the same guys, but I think it's pretty much impossible to pick against Blaney here. He's second in points on the season so far. We haven't done a track like Phoenix yet, obviously, but this plays right into his hand because he dominates Phoenix, at least from an average results perspective, that we don't really see anywhere else on the calendar from pretty much any other driver. I expect another good finish from Christopher Bell. He's actually led the 4th most laps here in the last few years, and I think he'll end up pretty solid even if he's not going to win the race. And I think that's going to sort of set up, I think him and Blaney may be the 2 dominant drivers, at least for the regular season, the 2 guys to beat, 2 guys with, even though Bell hasn't won a championship yet, he feels like a championship level driver, and Blaney clearly is a championship level driver. I think that we're going to see those 2 sort of separate themselves from the field. The only guy that's won here multiple times recently is Joey Logano, of course, winning last year as well. So you have to give him a little bit of a shout out there as a guy that we haven't mentioned yet that could definitely compete. But I think just given what we've seen from Blaney on this track, I think, I just couldn't pick against anybody else.
Yeah, Byron, Chastain, Buescher, and Reddick are the rest of the top 4 or top 5 in terms of average finishing position the last 6 races here at Phoenix. Byron and Chastain both have a win. The other guys do not. So I would look out for Chastain and Byron as well this week because they know how to get it done here, and they both consistently run good here as well. So those are 2 other guys that I would keep an eye on, but I think Blaney has got to be the favorite by far. Like you mentioned, Logano, 2 wins here in the last 6 races. Obviously knows his way around here too. So there's a few other guys to keep an eye on, but I think Blaney is the one that is going to be by far, far and away the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, Blaney's lowest finish here in the next gen era is 5th. So, yeah. I mean, even if he doesn't win this race, I would be shocked if he's not competing up there at the top on Sunday. I mean, he's sort of a can't miss favorite this week, and I think he'll finally cash it in and get that win he hasn't had for a few years here.
Yeah, he's got to be at least a top 10 lock, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would take a race-ending accident to not have him finish in that top 10. But, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, that's everything for this week. We'll be back next week to break down everything from Phoenix, and then we'll also get some F1 preseason going as well. Obviously, we're just a couple weeks away from that starting up. Super excited to get that. I don't know if we'll pair it with that episode next week, next Monday or Tuesday, or if we'll have our own separate preview episode for that as well. But super excited to get that going and have all three of our big series underway here.
Yeah, we'll really be in full swing here in a couple weeks, and we're excited to have all you guys along with us for the ride for this season.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back next week.